Ohio State loses to Indiana. Ohio State loses to Michigan. Ohio State misses the CFP.
Would Ryan Day be fired if that happened?
I think he would just take another job somewhere. I think that he would meet with Ross Bjork and be like, "Don't worry, I'm not going to make you fire me. I'll go somewhere else."
Yeah, like I'm not a big fire Ryan Day person because I think he does a good job in most aspects of his coaching situation. But I think if that were to happen, that would be it.
Yeah, that would be it. I think it's highly far-fetched because I don't think Michigan can beat them. Indiana being able to beat Ohio State. I don't think that's completely out of the realm of possibility.
And I think Ohio State could lose to Indiana, still get in, and things be okay. Like
Absolutely.
The thing that's paramount for Ohio State right now, and I know that they want a Big Ten championship because it's been a long time since they've gotten one. They have to beat Michigan this year. Like, I don't think.
Yes.
I honestly, if they lose to Michigan and make the playoff, I still don't know how people are feeling about it. You know what I mean? They cannot lose to Michigan this year. So, but like that's not much of a disaster scenario. That's just a team crapping its pants. Like it's a
disaster for Ohio State. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be a disaster for the whole league or for the system itself. It can just be a disaster for the team.
But then, like, just losing to A&M and missing the playoff is the Texas disaster, right?
Well,
like,
that's the next one I have.
Yeah,
that's the next one I have. But here's the thing: that one cuts both ways. So let's talk about that one. Texas loses one of the next two games, either Arkansas or Kentucky. And then and then Texas A&M beats Auburn. So both of those teams go into the SEC championship game, or not the SEC, why is it? Both those teams go into the Texas A&M game with 2 losses. Now, Texas A&M would have one fewer conference loss, but I don't think that matters in this case. The idea of an elimination situation where the winner of this game eliminates the other is the most delicious, saucy. Like this is the spicy garlic parm. This is savory and spicy all at the same time. I cannot wait. Like that's what I want that game to be. Texas and Texas A&M have not played since 2011. All they've done is snipe at one another. They were both babies about it when they were in different conferences and wouldn't play each other. If they get into a game where the loser is definitely out of the playoff and the winner is definitely in, it will be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah. Well, let me unpack that. So if you're saying Texas loses one more time and then they play,
because there's a scenario where Texas loses that game and gets in, they keep winning.
No, but I think if Texas loses another game before A&M and then beats A&M, they would still maybe have to win the SEC. They would still have a problem. I don't know if there's what the actual disaster scenario here is, Andy? Is if A&M beats one-loss Texas and then one-loss Texas is thrown into the pot with everybody else, A&M goes to the SEC championship game, and then Texas misses the playoff because they lost the tiebreaker because their schedule sucks. That's the disaster because, if Texas loses again, I think Texas would drop out of the top 10. Like, they don't have any wins, and they'd have 2 losses at that point. And if they lost to a bad team, they would be out of the picture completely, I think, at that point. And then they would have to play their way back into the playoff by beating A&M and then winning the SEC. So, I think that the bigger disaster scenario is Texas loses the only game that it can on its schedule, which is the A&M game, which is a heated rivalry on the road, and then they're still 10-2, feel like they have a chance to get in and then don't.
And then have the rug pull out from under. Oh, yes. Actually, you're right about this because here's how that unfolds. So imagine this. Texas A&M beats Texas. Texas finishes the regular season 10-2. Texas A&M finishes the regular season 10-2. Texas A&M winning this game puts Texas A&M in the SEC championship game. We know that to be true. Texas then has to spend a week watching Texas A&M get ready to go play for the SEC championship. They'll watch Texas A&M play for the SEC championship, possibly win it. And if they do, then they're probably the 2 seed in the playoff at that point.
Yeah.
And then Texas has to sit there and sweat on Sunday at 11 a.m. Central Time after the championship games, and they've got like ESPN's got the camera, and if you're like a third, 8th tier sideline reporter, you're not getting in. Isn't that what Florida State said last year? So
let me raise the stakes even more, Andy. You want to keep going down this rabbit hole? I'll raise them. Even more.
Let's go.
Texas enters the game with 1 loss. A&M has 2 losses. A&M wins. A&M then goes on to the SEC championship game, plays Alabama and loses. And then there's a head-to-head discussion at the end of the year between a 3-loss A&M team and a 2-loss Texas team for the final SEC spot, and A&M gets chosen over them because they won the head-to-head.
And Notre Dame also gets chosen because they have a win at Kyle Field and Texas doesn't. Oh, my God.
And then Texas is out. And not only does Texas out with a better record, but Texas is out to A&M because they were chosen over them. Because I don't think that we are in an era where, I was complaining about earlier in the show, that 3rd loss for A&M might not be the eliminating factor. If you are down to 2 teams for 1 spot and those 2 teams played each other, I really do believe that you should take the team that beat the other one.
Yes. 3-loss Texas A&M getting in over 2-loss Texas.
Head-to-head. Wow. Be a head-to-head loss in a game and then a head-to-head loss in a debate between committee members over who's better.
That is, you're right. That is probably every team's worst nightmare, but especially Texas's, because losing the game and then losing the boardroom debate is that's the ultimate insult to injury.
You have to also peel back the psychology of the rivalry. Texas fans feel like they are better than A&M fans. So losing to A&M and then losing that debate to A&M strikes right into the sore of the entire inferiority complex that it makes this rivalry so crazy.
This is insane. You're right. Okay, so
Texas fans say things like, "I don't care about A&M. They're not worthy of me thinking about them." Like that. That's what they think and say. Yeah, that'd be insane. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, that's fine. Because you're right. This is a lot better than rooting for the winning in. They both enter the game with 2 losses scenario. This is a crazier situation, I think, than that one.
Yeah, and when we're talking about saucy disaster scenarios, I think there's a difference between just losing and blowing it, like in the Ohio State scenario, and you losing a game but still being worthy to be in, and then circumstances of other games that you didn't play in are the reason you didn't win or didn't get in.
Rasta, man, A&M isn't even our rival. We think very little of them. Well, guess what? You're going to be thinking an awful lot about them the next few weeks.
You know what a lot of Texas fans say, Andy? I'm like if I come across a Texas fan, and I come across them all the time. Like my wife went to A&M, and her entire friend group is A&M and Texas people. Like if I ask, and the Texas fans and A&M fans are very passionate about their given teams. But if you ask a Texas fan, are you going? Because I always ask, are you going to go to the game? Because who wouldn't? I would want to go if I were a Texas fan. They always go, nah, I don't. We don't go to College Station. That's what people say. Or I'm not going to go there. That's
they're going to get some sort of spores on them.
It's like beneath them to go to College Station to go watch a game there.
You know what that
that's
is?
How they are.
That's the most arrogant way of saying we can't afford the tickets.
Well, these people can, I promise you. I know, but I really do think that there is a superiority feeling that they wouldn't degrade themselves to go to College Station, which I think is stupid. And if I were an A&M person, they would hate them for that.
Yeah. Come on. You get some fuego tacos. Let's go. Who wouldn't want to go?
I would. I mean, right, I think the whole point of doing it.
Here's another Ohio State scenario, and this one comes from John in Spain. So this is the way John lays it out. Ohio State loses to Indiana. Oregon loses a fluky rivalry game to Washington. Penn State then beats Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, and you may be wondering, okay, how does that happen? So the way that happens is if Oregon were to lose to Washington, the way they would decide who plays for the Big Ten championship, because it would be Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana all tied. Well, Indiana would be in because they'd be undefeated, but Oregon and Penn State would be tied. So it'd be common opponents, and Penn State beat Washington and Oregon didn't. So That's why it would be Indiana, Penn State in the Big Ten championship game in this scenario. So your at-larges from the Big Ten would be Oregon and Indiana. Penn State would be your Big Ten champ. Okay, here's more of the scenario. Tennessee, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Ole Miss all went out. Texas A&M beats Tennessee in the championship game. So A&M's in. That makes your at-larges Tennessee, Alabama, and Ole Miss. Notre Dame wins out. That makes Notre Dame an at-large. Undefeated BYU then loses the championship game in the Big 12 in a squeaker. Really close. Overtime, maybe. Controversial call. Ohio State goes from ranked number 2 right now to completely out of the playoff. And as John says, Columbus burns.
And I think that I still think that would be more of a disaster scenario for
losing to Michigan.
Ohio State. I think, but you know, like you always talk about like Wonder Fan and thinking about fan psychology, like what would you rather have happen? But I guess you're out in both, so you would rather beat Michigan and be out. But I think that one would sting more sting differently because like a bunch of crazy things would have to happen that are out of your control.
That's like a Rube Goldberg invention of the to cause you pain. Like you assume at some point, like the little wire's not going to get snapped and the contraption falls apart and you're okay. Did you ever play Mousetrap when you were a kid?
Oh yeah. Am I breathing?
Yeah. So
I didn't put it together though, believe it or not.
I believe it. So yeah, you're hoping the boot doesn't kick the thing that knocks the cage down. Like,
yeah,
this would be all of those things happen in perfect order to screw you. Like, that would be horrific.
You know what that is? That's the difference between emotional pain and physical pain.
Yes.
They're both hurt really bad. Which one do you want?
Yeah. Scott, hey, Andy, does someone on your staff not know how to spell loses? I believe that was a copy and paste from the original email. So sorry about that. Our copy editing needs to get picked up here. So, all right. Another disaster scenario. And this is one for an entire conference. And I had not thought about this one until Clay sent it to me. Imagine Miami suffers another loss. SMU slips up and loses a game. And Clemson gets in and wins the ACC championship, but gets beaten by South Carolina, which we talked about before. But here's the added twist to this. Army beats Notre Dame and finishes the season undefeated and wins the American Athletic Conference. Boise State continues to win and wins the Mountain West as a 12-1 champion. Clay is a lifelong Clemson fan and a recent alum. He says this would be a disaster for the ACC because there is a chance that ACC champ Clemson in that scenario is the 6th highest ranked conference champ and is not in the top 12.
I think that on paper you could get there. That would never happen.
That's the least likely. I think Army beating Notre Dame is highly unlikely. And I realize that a lot of our scenarios even if all of the things,
I still think that if all of those things happened, Clemson would be firmly into the playoff though.
I don't think so.
You don't?
No. You're gonna tell the troops that they're not the undefeated troops that they're not in over a 9-3 Clemson? No, I just lost to South Carolina.
I think if you cut and pasted that,
or 10-3, I guess they'd be.
That would be a disaster scenario for a team in the SEC that's 10-2 that thinks they're going. Like I think that Clemson would go to the playoff. I think if you win a power conference,
okay. How? Who gets left out for them?
I don't know.
Not Georgia.
I think
beat the crap out of them.
So let's just keep going down the rabbit hole. God, this is fun. If you had that scenario, Army's in.
Yep.
Boise State's is in.
Boise State.
Boise State beat UNLV and is in. And then Texas is 10-2 at the end of the year with no quality wins. Who has a more impressive resume? Texas or Clemson in that scenario?
Well, remember, Georgia's not even making it in this scenario. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm mixing up my scenarios. So
there's a lot of scenarios. Yeah.
Clay didn't pick SEC teams in this one, but there's a possibility that Georgia is kind of near the bottom of this. Clemson's not ranked higher than Georgia.
Yeah, I guess if they were
not
if
a
they were
chance
head to head with Georgia. Yeah. I think that they would get in over the 4th team.
But they're already too far down. Because remember, Army's in, Boise State's in. Now Notre Dame's out, so that helps. That opens up a spot.
You know what else could happen there? Is that Boise would be left out
as the 6th highest ranked conference champ.
Like, I don't think so
because they're already number 11. Are they just going to drop them now? Or I guess they're number 13. They're just going to drop them now?
Andy, the committee will do whatever they want. I don't think that where they are. Yeah, they would. I don't know. And they'd be like, we think Clemson's better. Like what? And then what are you going to say? Okay. Like that's what they do. They do it all the time. They did it on Tuesday.
Okay. All right.
But I think that like if you had a undefeated Army, a 1-loss Mountain West champion, and a 3-loss ACC champion, I don't know if I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I'm not convinced that the ACC would come in 3rd place there.
We'll see.
But they have no quality wins in that scenario, right? Unless they beat Miami at the end of the year or something. Right. I don't know who they would be.
Or they would be beating SMU.
Oh,
they would not be beating Miami.
Which isn't a big win in the committee's eyes right now.
Which would have a 2nd loss, by the way. That was part of the scenario that was laid out.
That is a nightmare. So. I mean, I'll just either way, that's a nightmare.
Like, what's the spiciest one of these? I think it's yours. I think it's your Texas one that you came up with where they lose on the field and in the boardroom.
Yeah. I think losing to A&M twice would be really tough in a 2-week period.
Oh, well, and the losing to A&M not on the field. Like that's what would really be the kick in the knackers, to use your term.
Knackers, yeah. The thing that would stink is that you would have a collection of people having to decide who is a more likely or better program at the moment to go win a championship, and then choosing A&M, who, by the way, in that scenario also would have an additional loss.
Yeah, right. They would have 3 losses. They're the same number of wins, but A&M would have another loss in the SEC championship game in that scenario.
But also, if A&M wins, and then there as a head-to-head discussion, and then they choose Texas, could you imagine that? Could you imagine if Texas went to the playoff because they have 1 fewer loss?
So it works both ways. It's incredible.
Like just that debate happening. Could you imagine A&M fans if they beat Texas on the field and then did not get to go to the playoff while Texas
and
won?
Texas did?
Imagine the inferiority complex.
God. Wow, it's even deeper than I imagined.
I actually think that one is worse than Texas losing twice to A&M. I think A&M beating them on the field and losing to them in the boardroom would be the worst possible scenario for anybody in the entire sport.
Rocky Top Tom has a pretty good one. The most Tennessee move ever. Beat Georgia in Athens and then lose to Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Oh, but again, here's another one we talked about. Here's another one we talked about involving Tennessee and Georgia. Georgia beats Tennessee on Saturday, gets knocked out of the playoff by losing to Georgia Tech. Like, that would be misery.
Yeah. Oh my God, the A&M losing in the boardroom after winning on the field. It does not. That's Ghost Pepper.
Spent 20 minutes on it earlier. Matt, this needs to be an annual segment. The only time of year it would work too, because there's 3 weeks left. You can kind of see the end of the regular. Matt, I think we can do one of these next week too.
Yeah, let's do it again when we get more information, because it's going to be crazy.